What happens when you hear the verse, not to be a borrower, but to be a lender? But you've been raised in a culture and a society and come from a system of beggars. On this episode, we're talking about the spirits of poverty, lack, and scarcity, and how we need to work to break those generational curses and to come from under the beggar spirit, the borrowing spirit, or mindset, however you feel comfortable calling it. On today's episode, you're listening to Measure of Royalty. I'm your host, prophetic licensed mental health counselor, Tenisam. In this day and age, it is easy to find ourselves in debt. Why? Because man's eyes are always wanting is something that the Bible tells us very clearly, that there will always be a desire of the flesh to look like um, luxury, to look like you have more than you have, to be in a position where people are in awe of your possessions, or I'll speak for myself, of my possessions. But that creates a borrowing based mentality. When we're told or taught that we're supposed to be lenders and not borrowers, we're supposed to be the head and not the tail, we're supposed to be above and not beneath. Like, these are all scriptural contexts that most Christians are aware of. The issue is that, and I'll speak for myself, I grew up in a society and in a church state, not church state, but in the state of the church that I was attending was in an impoverished neighborhood. We were told that it was better to be poor on earth than we would be rich in heaven. We're poor in circumstance and we'll be rich in glory. So we were taught to believe that it was okay to be impoverished and to have this poverty mindset, lack and scarcity, and to be beggars, because the narrative of the elderly lady who gave the two mites, when Jesus says that she is superior to those who had millions and gave a nickel or a dollar, she was superior to them because she gave more because she had less. We were told these narratives, and we were given these ideas that actually kept us impoverished. And as I say these things even now, I'm thinking about how ridiculous that sounds, that we would we would have this situation where everything was supposed to be gloomy and gray because it was easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the courts of heaven. And all of these verses, which actually contradict who God is, because it still doesn't answer why our predecessors and forefathers were so wealthy. We are the descendants of royalty, right? Think about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were given large lands, vast lands, and properties. They were given covenant agreements with God, where He tells us, His people, that He would give us a land that we did not have to build on because the houses would be there and the vineyards would be there, that our vintage would last into the new harvest. So these two concepts are contradictory. So, what is the Lord actually conveying there? What is He telling us when He talks about this idea of a camel not being able to get through the eye of a needle? First of all, anything is possible with God, and Jesus never said a camel cannot get through an eye of a needle. He said it'd be easier for a rich man to enter into heaven. Um, So these ideas that were promoted to me when I was younger, that I heard over and over again, reinforced poverty and made us okay with it. And so we didn't strive for more. I just remember thinking when I was younger, like, I've got to get out of poverty. I've got to get out of situations where I didn't know where money was coming from. I didn't know how bills were going to be paid. I didn't know if the lights were going to be on. Some of you listening understand that clearly. Some of you listening think, wow, that's crazy. Um, but that was the situation for me growing up. And I knew that I had to go against the grain of what was expected of me, because what societally was expected of me was that I would become a single mother, pregnant with, some kids, and living in the project housing, accepting government assistance, which is a poverty mindset. And we could go over the grand scheme of all of that. But I want to tell you a story. I was listening to I don't know, it's probably YouTube or something like that. I was listening to a YouTube channel, and there was a young man who was attempting to go to college, and he was getting government funding to go to college. And he wanted to get a job so that he could have a part-time job and stay at home to cut the cost and go to school in state, stay at home and have his job and go to college. And his mother told him that he couldn't get a job, because if he got a job and he still lived at the house, then he was going to mess up her government assistance. She was going to get her food stamps cut, or she was going to get her cash assistance cut, because someone in the household was making money. And so she'd rather stay impoverished, and not only stay impoverished, but prevent her son from excelling so that she could keep the bits that she knew, versus choosing to reach out and grab hold of the unknown. And so that to me was like an example of how poverty is really a mindset and a trap. It's a spiritual hold. And it was a conspiracy created by people to keep other people down. I'm not going to get into details of that. You can explore that on your own. And I am always encouraging you to do that. But if you know anyone who is or has been, or if you yourself have been in a poverty, grew up in poverty, or find yourself in a financially unstable situation right now, you know how fearful it is to like spend something and not know when it's coming back. And you have two kind of things that would happen. One, if you're someone who is used to money coming in, and let's say now you grew up in poverty and you're used to having money coming in regularly because you have like a six-figure salary, or you're making good money, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 a year, somewhere around there. You're used to good money coming in, but you think that that means that you no longer have the poverty or the lack mindset. That's not true. What would happen is it's matured into buying things that are unnecessary, buying things that are aesthetics, buying things when you're stressed, making emotional purchases. That is a poverty mindset. Because when we say poverty mindset, the opposite of poverty is abundance, right? Or the opposite of lack is abundance. The opposite of poverty is wealth. So is Is it a wealthy mindset not to fund your 401k, not to have stocks and bonds, not to have a savings account that will hold you for 3 to 6 months if something emergent comes up? Now, I get it. There are plenty of people who wish they could do those things, but just cannot. Um, but then there are people, those same people who can't do those things, but will buy a pair of Jordans. or buy a $500 purse, or buy an outfit that they're saving for some unknown day, or pay $400 or $500 for perfumes or colognes. But you don't have a savings account, you don't have a 401k, you don't have an IRA set up, and you're struggling to make your monthly payments, but you're making $100,000 a year. You live in a 1 bedroom, or you live in a house that's way too big for your income. And now, instead of being a lender, you're in the position of a borrower. And I was talking to someone, um, a spiritual mother of mine. I was speaking to her earlier this week, and I was saying, coming from the status, the social status of beggar, because I think that's what impoverished communities look like. And you can dispute that. I want to be clear. Like, when I say beggar, I mean it's hard to get out of that pit that I was speaking of with the mother and the son. That is, she's not living on her own finances and her own means. She's living on the means of the state. And to be extra clear, like, I lived on those means. I personally was someone who, when I was going through my divorce, I got financial assistance from the state, from the government. And I got that assistance as I went through graduate school. So I wasn't just like, I'm just going to sit here and get this assistance. It was scary also to get off. So I felt the leap that I had to take to go from getting that assistance to living without that assistance. And it was scary. And it was because the money in the future was unknown, whereas the money that I was getting from the government was consistent and knowable. And there's some strange security in knowing that you'll have just enough to get by. And that is a scarcity mindset. And that's how the spirit of scarcity enters into our lives when we are scrounging and scraping. And this is what I mean by having a beggar's mindset, right? So I'm not saying something about someone else that I'm not prepared to say about myself. Excuse me. I had myself in that position where I was at the mercy of the state, and they could give me money or not give me money, would wreck my life if they removed their assistance, would have wrecked my life if they had removed their assistance. So I'm not knocking anybody's circumstance. I've been there, and I'll be the first to just, like, I'm just going to be completely honest. I'm not throwing any shade on anybody. I'm being completely honest about myself and where I've been, so that in the effort that it might help someone else to say, like, wait, she can do it, I can do it, we can all elevate. So I'm not just speaking about that mother in that was in the Bronx, New York. I'm speaking about myself growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. And so that mindset, the beggar's mindset, you think that you're over it when you get these financial situations. But then what happens is you get these credit cards, and the credit cards, the credit limits make you think, make you believe, make you inflate who you are and what you have and what you can purchase. And so what you're not realizing is, if you're not careful, then you turn from a beggar to a borrower, and you think you're elevated. You think you've moved on. You think you have left poverty and lack and scarcity behind, but you're making emotional decisions about your finances. I'm angry. I'm going to go buy a new Chanel bag. I'm going to just charge it to the Amex. Well, that Amex is 26% APR, and you're charging it to the Amex not because you want to do something good with your credit, whereas you charge it to the Amex, you immediately go get your debit card and you pay the Amex $400. No, no, no. You charge it to the Amex, and it's sitting on that Amex card for 6 months. And all the interest and all of that is going to build up and accrue. because you didn't really have the $400 to spend, or 4,000, apologies, because that's how much a Chanel bag costs. You didn't really have the $4,000 to spend on a Chanel bag. Excuse my foolishness with saying $400. I was thinking about Chanel perfume, which is about $400. But you didn't really have that money, so now it's just sitting on your Amex card, building and accruing more and more debt, and that is going from a beggar to a borrower. And you think, oh, I don't know, the lack is behind me, the scarcity is behind me, the poverty is behind me. And you meet people who are literally running away from scarcity and lack, and they're running in such a way that they look put together, but emotionally they are in shambles, because they're always afraid that someone is going to see that they came from nothing, or someone is going to find out that they can't afford the house or the car, that someone is going to feel like, oh, I'm better than you. So we're always competing to try to look like we're in a wealthy place, while actually being emotionally and spiritually in a borrowing seat, or in a seat of scarcity. Um, and those are mentalities that cause us to mm, pretend. We can never let anyone close to us, because if people got close to us, then they would see that we don't actually have all of the things that we've been alluding to having. So, how do you get rid of this lack mentality and get to this wealthy mindset? My first thought, my first everything, anytime I'm thinking about breaking, especially anything that's generational. Like, and when I say generational, I mean like you struggled with lack, your mom struggled with lack, your grandmama struggled with lack, or you struggle with lust, your grandmama or your granddaddy struggled with lust, and your daddy struggled with lust, your granddaddy struggled with lust. Whatever these things are that you're trying to break, you have to realize that these are generational curses that have been pursuing your family for generations. And the devil is cunning and he is wise. And we don't like to think of him that way, but he's been around a long time. Okay. And he has a generational playbook that he looks back and says, oh, this will trip him up. Oh, this will trip her up. Oh, this will slow her down. Oh, this will stop her in her tracks. And when we're trying to break out of these mindsets, we have to first identify, I am spending because I am sad. Every time I drive down the street and I see a chair on the side of the road that looks decent, like it might be worth something, I have to collect that chair, because I never know when I'm going to need that chair. That is a scarcity mindset. Oh, I got all this stuff from Amazon and I don't have anywhere to put it. I'm just going to keep it in a box. Now we're talking about hoarding, which is also a scarcity mindset. And we're bordering on OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So we have to be careful that we're not allowing or deluding ourselves into believing that we have escaped these cycles and patterns. My first thought is always to fast, and we pray and we ask the Lord to break that mindset and expose the tentacles of that mindset, because mindsets attack what our mind. So we come against these mind binding spirits, these spirits that attach themselves to the way that we think about money, the way that we think about spending and saving, the way that we think about ourselves. You are not walking around looking like poverty. Maybe not anymore. Maybe you did. You have to let yourself be fully vulnerable before the Lord. You have to let Him know that you're sorry, that you've been wasting money, that you've been wasting the finances that He's given you on frivolous and pointless things, especially if you're not tithing or if you're not giving up offerings to the Lord, meaning, and that can be done in different ways. Listen, I don't think that every tithe has to go to a church. I don't even think you have to belong to a church. Well, I know you don't have to belong to a church to tithe or to give an offering of financial support. If you belong to a church, great. If you tithe to your church, great. It is 10% of whatever the produce of your hands is. So for me, that could mean that I offer a discount in therapy. So I offer sliding fee rates for different people at different times. It could also mean that if the Lord tells me to gift someone with a copy of a book, then I don't hesitate. I do that. That's an offering. It's an offering to the Lord, but the Lord is using it for this person who's in need of that type of assistance with this book, the book for clarity on anxiety or stresses and trials in life, or maybe they're getting ready to get married and the Lord tells me to gift them the 21-day fasting companion for a single waiting woman. Whatever it is, that is the produce of my hands, and that is what I give to the Lord. Or sometimes it's the financial piece, where when I get each session, whatever fees I get, once the money is deposited, I take 10% out of that and I put it into a separate account. And then I use that for ministry works. So, whatever it is that the Lord tells you to do, if He has given you an ability, a gift, a talent, a service, all of these things are the produce of your hands. Um, back, back in the day before Jesus, the Hebrews would bring to the priests 10% of the produce of their land. So some would bring wine, some would bring fruit, some would bring wheat, some would bring money, gold coins, gold plates, silver, brass, iron. They brought the produce of their hands. So, whatever that is, if you can afford to buy yourself a watch, you can afford to tithe and make offerings from the produce of your hands to the Lord. And whatever that means, and however the Lord calls you to do that or expects you to do that. And if you think He's not calling you, then you need to listen a little closer, because it's something that He expects all of us to do in one way or another. I know that churches preach there's one way to tithe, there's one way to provide offerings, but the biblical account says otherwise. Okay. So, um, if you have this lack mindset and you want to move into a wealthy mindset or an abundant mindset, then you have to start to get around people who have abundance. And, you know, in society, I'm thinking about, like, I was watching this show. What's the name of that show? It's on HBO. It's about the 1800s, the Gilded Age. And on the show, when people would get divorced or lose their station in life, like they lost their money, they gambled it away, they somehow became impoverished, or a woman got divorced, they would shut that person out of society. And they shut them out of society because they realize something that we need to put front of mind. Those things, it's like a spirit of poverty, a spirit of divorce, and they put it away from themselves. Now, do I think that they necessarily went about it the right way? I don't know. I don't get to judge those people. But I know that when you put certain things away from yourself, it's easier to focus on the positives. Whereas if you want to be a wealthy person, then it's time to start watching videos about how to behave wealthy, how to entertain wealth, how to speak like a wealthy person, how to interact and engage in the mannerisms of wealth, right? Because when we look at someone whose hair is not done, who looks sweaty, whose neck collar is stretched out, and you know they look like they haven't showered, we don't look at that person and say, I want to be next to that person. I want to know what they've been doing to get like that. But when you see the person pull up in a Jaguar and you see them sitting in a beautiful suit and tie in their car, you're thinking, I want to get next to that person. I want to know what they done. Well, you might get next to that person and find out that they done some terrible and atrocious things and want to get away from them, just the same way that by your deceptive view of the person with the sweaty neck collar, that you want to be away from them because of how they look. So we don't necessarily want to say like this person who's in this nice car is definitely doing it right, but we can say they look wealthy, and we should investigate that further. We shouldn't just lurch into doing whatever they're doing, because there might be some underhanded things, and there might be some decision making that they're making that is not aligned with the prosperity of the kingdom of heaven. So we want to be clear about what we're looking for. And while we shouldn't judge people by the way that they look, we do. And so you might look at this person with, the messed up hair and a sweaty face and think that person is lazy, or, sits on the couch all day and impoverished. You might be right. Yeah, you might be right. But that's also goes for us ourselves. Even if we're struggling with finances, or we're struggling with lack or poverty, we don't have to look like the station we're in. And I think this is where things get conflated, and how we get into a society where people aren't looking impoverished but don't have any dollars in the bank, where they look amazing but they have so much debt, they're drowning in debt. And I feel like this is one thing that causes us to be so individualized in society today, because we don't want people to get too close. We don't want close community. We don't want close quarters, because we don't want people to know how we make our money. We don't want people to know if we got money, if we don't got money. We want our personal problems, our private issues to be ours alone. And that's not who the Lord called us to be. There is coming a time, and there is coming an hour where you won't be able to buy or sell, and I just have to say it, without the mark of the beast. So what that leaves is Christians trading with one another. Who is in your inner circle right now that you could trade with your the produce of your hands and the produce of their hands? Are the people that you surround yourself with good Christians that sharpen you and that you sharpen? Let's stop looking at money. That's called the spirit of mammon. Let's stop looking at mammon and start looking at the circle of people we have around us. Can I borrow from this person in a way that is an exchange for what I have? Can we leverage each other's gifting, talents, services, and anointings? Or am I friends with this person because they drive a Bentley? Am I friends with them for what they can do for me? Because that's also a lack spirit. That's a poverty spirit, a poverty mindset. What are we doing in community and in communion with one another? Getting away from lack and poverty is hard. But you do it not by spending more money, but by educating yourself in kingdom wealth principles. The word of the Lord says in Proverbs that the blessing of the Lord is upon us. It brings us riches and it adds no sorrow, and he adds no sorrow. The Lord adds no sorrow to the wealth that he gives us. Let's look to him for financial strategies, for wealth strategies, for community connections, because he will connect us with those who in the last days will be able to sup with and will be able to barter with one another for goods and for services. Now is a time to build that community and get close with your neighbors. In Jesus' name, we need to get to this place because the time is coming. Come out of poverty, come out of lack, come out of scarcity. Break those mindsets off of yourself, off of your household, off of your bloodline, so that when the time comes, you are ready and you are able and you will survive because your faith is in God and not in money. Well, I hope this episode blessed you. If you like this episode, if there was anything in it that you felt uh, lifted you, helped you in any way, please share this episode with someone that you care about and who you feel um, is focused on community and is able to see you and loves you, who needs to hear this message. Again, you can find us on Instagram at Remnant House Counseling. You can check our website out at remnanthousecounseling.com. And feel free to go on Amazon and order any of the fasting companions. This is Tenisam Montgomery, prophetic licensed mental health counselor, and you are listening to Measure of Royalty.